Hello and welcome to the Occupational Therapy webinar series. I'm really thrilled that you're here with us today. This is these two passions of mine, occupational therapy and Parkinson's disease. And so I'm so happy to be here with you on this first episode. As mentioned, that this is a three-part series, and it's all about how occupational therapy can help with Parkinson's disease. The second and third episode will really dive into some more specific topics. But really for today, this first episode, I really wanted to take a step back and give you a broad view of what occupational therapy is and how it fits with your healthcare team. That way you will know if and when you might need the services. So what I'd like to do for today and the areas that I'd like to cover are first just define occupational therapy. So the name can be confusing. There's lots of misunderstandings. So hopefully after today, you'll find that to be cleared up. I also want to talk about the OT process. So we'll talk about that a little bit. Then I'm going to move into the keys to treatment and management of Parkinson's, give you a broad view of that, and then really dive into explaining how OT can specifically help with Parkinson's disease. And then finally, I'll cover insurance coverage and then also talk about further resources that you will be able to get to. So let's get started then. What is occupational therapy? So that really is the age-old question. Us OTs, sometimes laugh about it. We get this question all the time. So what is occupational therapy? So really what I'd like to do here now is define it. So this first piece, I'm going to give you the official definition. So bear with me for a second. But it's the therapeutic use of everyday life occupations with persons, groups, or populations to support occupational performance and participation. So really, main goals of OT is to achieve health, well-being, and participation in life through engagement in occupations. Wow, that is a lot of words together, but really what I'm talking about in simplified terms is what occupies our time. Okay, so we also are talking about the therapy of doing. That's how another way that I've heard people talk about. So if you could move forward on that slide, these are kind of the simple pieces here that simplify things. So, but really, when we talk about occupations, what we really mean are meaningful activities. So if you can use those words in combination. So meaningful activities are really what our focus is as occupational therapists. So what I'd like to show now with this next diagram is these are the occupations. So you say, okay, well, what are you talking about occupations? These 9 areas where you see these colorful ovals, these are the occupations that we think about. So there's play, work, ADLs, which stands for activities of daily living, leisure, IADLs, which stands for instrumental activities of daily living, rest and sleep, social participation, education, and health management. So those are the large categories that we operate in as occupational therapists. And I wanted to share this diagram with you because this is a broad view of how OTs think. So this is a frequently used model of how we think. It's called the person, environment, occupation model. And so I talked about the occupations, but really in the middle is the person. So if you see that, the person, we think about what are their skills? What are their strengths? What are their different factors? Also, what patterns and habits and routines do they have? So we think about all those things when we meet someone and get to know them. And then surrounding that with the person is the environment and the context. So we also really look at the environment and how that impacts the person, which it can be very impactful. So really all of these pieces are what the OTs consider when we're evaluating and then making a treatment plan to help folks. So a really good OT is going to make it look easy, but I just kind of wanted to pull the curtain back and let you see a little bit of really some background process of what's going on when you work with an OT. So really with education wise, folks can have their master's degree or doctorate degree. They also study health sciences like psychology, anatomy, physiology, human development, also environmental design and occupational science. And there's also occupational therapy assistants, which are really vital to the team also, and they can carry out any treatment plan. And then you'll see here on the right are practice areas. So these are many different areas where occupational therapists can practice. And we can also work anywhere from newborn age all the way through older adults. So as you can see, it's a very wide range of places and people that OTs can work with. And it's also a very holistic profession. So I do wanted to kind of bring that up because when you have Parkinson's and you're looking for someone, an occupational therapist, you want to keep in mind that, there might be some OTs that have specialized in a different area. So you really want to look for someone that has experience with Parkinson's. So that's important to remember. So then moving on to, now that I've kind of reviewed the basics of occupational therapy, let's really apply that to how it can help with you. So, the things to kind of remember with treatment, I want you to kind of remember these four big areas of treatment. So this is what we see. People who manage well with Parkinson's are really doing a good job and have a good handle on these four areas, which are your healthcare team, exercise, nutrition, and support. So those are really the big, huge areas to think about when you're managing well. Okay, now these can be whole courses. These could be all webinar series. This could be go into everything. So don't have time to get into all that today. But what I do want to go into is your healthcare team, because this is where the occupational therapist fits in. So you can see all these folks that are possibilities on your healthcare team, and the OT is one of them. So then, as I mentioned, that healthcare team, I would like to take a minute to just go through each one of these healthcare professionals and talk about how they could help with Parkinson's, just so you kind of have an idea so that, you may not need all of these professionals, but if and when you do, when you can call on them. So first and foremost, your neurologist or your movement disorder specialist and nurse, they are the team leader, okay? So they're going to help you with medications and other possible treatments to help you manage your symptoms well. Next would be a physical therapist. They're going to help with walking, strength, balance, posture, and really creating a individualized exercise program that's just made for you. Then next is occupational therapist. We mainly, overview is help with home and community safety, being independent with those meaningful activities I talked about, and also thinking and cognition. Then next would be speech therapist, speech and language therapist. They would help if you're having slow or soft speech, or if you're having trouble swallowing, and they also can help with thinking and cognition. Another healthcare professional would be a nutritionist. So as we know, nutrition is really important. So they would go through good foods to eat, any kind of medication interactions that might be important to know with your Parkinson meds, and also just helping create a good eating routine. And finally, a psychiatrist or psychologist or a counselor are really a good idea that you can always add to your team if you're experiencing anxiety or depression, and just overall general coping. So now that I've kind of gone through the healthcare team, now let's really dig into occupational therapy and how it can specifically help with Parkinson's. So I'm going to go through a few large areas. These are some example areas of when OT might be appropriate to help. So you may not experience all of these areas, but it's, again, good to know that you can call on them if you ever find that you need this. So one area is just managing Parkinson's well. And this can be throughout your journey. Coming up with a good exercise routine, medication, managing your medications well, energy conservation, because we know that fatigue can be very common for folks. And then navigating the healthcare system and communicating well with all of your healthcare providers. And I did want to jump real quick. I said exercise routine, and you might have thought, now wait a second, you just said physical therapist helps with that. So I wanted to take just a quick second, because we do get the question, what's the difference between physical therapy and occupational therapy? And I think this might highlight it as one example. So a physical therapist is really going to help you come up with a specific exercise program that's made for you and tailored to you based on your needs. So they're gonna work with you on the exact program. An occupational therapist then would take that program and make sure that you are incorporating it into your daily routine and your weekly routine. So that's kind of how, these professions work together. They have their own area, but then it's important, and they work together to make sure that you are managing really well. So then the next area is home safety and design. So I mentioned before in that diagram that I showed you that in the environment is a big piece that we think about. So there's actually some therapists that OTs specialize in environmental design. And so if you're ever thinking about maybe remodeling your home or even building new, or a lot of times, a bathroom remodel or something like that, calling on an occupational therapy professional that understands the environment would be a really smart thing to do in your design process, because they're going to really look at what your needs are and what you need for the future and help make recommendations to the contractor, to the architect about what things would be helpful so that you can age in place. A third whole area is work accommodations. So if you're still working, but you're noticing maybe you're having some trouble at work, sometimes it's with the computer or other kinds of things. And OT would really come in either in your workplace, or if you don't want that, they would work with you separately and talk through what are the trouble areas and assess what's going on, and then make recommendations of how you can adapt some of your job functions so that you can continue to do your job. So then another whole area would be sleep training. So we know at Parkinson's that it can really affect your sleep sometimes. And so OTs can help come and work with you on healthy sleep habits and routines. Another big area is independence with daily activities. So this is all the activities you do throughout your day. I mentioned those ADLs and IADLs before with the occupation. So this would cover all of those. And, this is a really big piece that if people are feeling like they're either unsafe or feeling like they want to be more independent, this is a big area that the OTs can work on. And actually, our second episode is I will really dive into that whole area of independence with daily activities and have a lot of examples and pictures and things like that. So just stay tuned for that for the next episode. And then another whole area is memory and thinking strategies. So, managing your medications. As we know, it can be really difficult and complicated with Parkinson's medications. So that can be a whole area that you could have goals with. And then also maintaining a schedule and maintaining your routine. So then a whole other area would be fall prevention. And we know that this is really critical to try to prevent falls and injuries. So OTs can help with home safety. So come in and do a home safety evaluation and then make recommendations of what you might do so that you could stay safe in your home. And I do have that starred because that's going to be the third episode that we talk about in this webinar series. I'll really dig in with home safety. So I hope you'll join us for that too. But also with fall prevention, we talk about getting in and out of the car, and then also getting around the community. All of these things are important that you want to stay safe. And finally, driving safety is a whole nother area. So some occupational therapists can become certified as a driving rehabilitation specialist. And so then they would be someone that would do an evaluation with you and then make recommendations and also possible training with driving. So those kind of give you overview of some common areas that an occupational therapist could work with Parkinson's. That's not an exhaustive list by any means, but just some common areas. So then what I'd like to do now is really go into some specific examples. I have 3 specific examples that I'm going to show you OT and PD in action. So this first one is a person that's been diagnosed for 4 years. So lately they've noticed some additional symptoms. They're really not sure how much exercise they should be doing. They're also wondering about their medication and what they should or shouldn't be eating. And they're seeing their doctor in 2 months, and they're really wanting to get the most out of their appointment. So this is a really great opportunity to think about what can you do to really maximize your care. And so when you think about an intervention at this point, we will go to the next slide. Is really Parkinson's education is really important at this point. So this can either be with the group or on an individual basis, but really learning about medications, nutrition, exercise, communicating with your healthcare team, and also getting support. These are all really important things to really get a good handle on of how you can do this. And really a key to this, you can kind of learn about it, but really a key is making specific goals for your situation and problem solving what works best for you. And really that's where the professional and the OT comes in, is really making it tailored to your situation, helping you make goals and achieve those goals. And so that's really an important piece. What the research shows is that, making goals and problem solving through that is really an important piece of these educational programs. Because if you do that, the outcomes do show that people can manage their symptoms better, they can have a greater level of functioning and a higher quality of life. So that's really important to do that. Okay, so now that's the first case. So now let's talk about a second example here. So this one's taking a shower. We're going to totally shift gears. All right. So this person has noticed that they are feeling unsteady, stepping in and out of the shower. Also, while they're showering, they're finding that it's tough when they drop something or try to wash their feet. And then they also get tired easily, and they're afraid that they're going to fall. So I'll say this is a really great time to talk to your doctor and tell them what's going on and ask them about an occupational therapy referral. Because what we want to do is we want to prevent injuries and falls before they happen. And so then if we look at this next slide, I'll show you, this is just kind of what an occupational therapist might come in and do. And I'm going to use that original model that I said in the beginning. We'll go through each thing. So number 1 first is the person. So the occupational therapist would look at what is the person's strength? What are their balance, their mobility? How are they getting around? And then also really look at their shower routine. How do they get in and out of the shower? What do they do? And problem solve those kinds of things. Look at those patterns. And then the second thing we'd look at is the environment. And so we what is the setup of the bathroom? I've been in many homes throughout the years, and it's just, they're all different. And, do you have a bathtub that you step in and out? Do you have a walk-in shower? Is there a door, a sliding door? What's going on there in that whole bathroom environment? And then, of course, look at any kind of safety hazards, and then also supports that might be there in the environment. And then finally, we think about the occupation. And so really thinking about breaking down and analyzing what tasks are needed throughout the shower process. So this is what OTs, we learn this in school, is really how to take something as simple as you think as taking a shower, a small activity, and breaking it down into all the different things that are needed to do that one activity, and understanding those things and then putting it all together. So that would be the evaluation. So then we'll move into what would be the intervention in this case. So one thing would be recommending installing 2 grab bars, one for getting in and out of the shower, and one while you're showering, so that you're safe with both of those tasks. Another thing would be, sometimes it's a simple thing like changing from bar soap to liquid soap, and maybe an easier dispenser. So it's something that's not, being fumbled around, and it's something that's just a lot more simple and static in the environment. Another thing would be to recommend the appropriate bath stool or chair. And that would help, alleviate some of the fear of falling, and then also the fatigue that the person said that they were experiencing. And I did want to note here, I bolded appropriate, and that's because you've seen a lot of bath chairs and stools out there. You can go on Amazon and pick one out. But what I have found through the years is, if you don't have the right type of stool or chair for your situation, it can sometimes be actually even more dangerous than not having that stool at all. I've seen that a lot when I go into homes. So that also kind of highlights the importance of seeing an occupational therapist and getting that recommendation, so that you're having the safest possible setup. And then what the OT would do is practice getting in and out safely. We call it a dry run. Practice getting in and out of the shower, then practice what they would do when they're handling different things in the shower. And so really it's about building these new routines. Most of the time people have been showering the same way their whole life. They've been doing it the same way. So now when we come in and we say, okay, we're gonna change this thing that you've been doing your whole life the same way, it takes time. And so that's why it's good to have these visits and practice. And then when the therapist comes back, how are things going? And if they say, well, this is working, but this isn't, then, problem solving that with the therapist and making sure you get it just right. And now the last example I wanted to give is managing medications. So like I mentioned, managing medications can get really complicated with Parkinson's meds. So in this instance, this is someone who recently a doctor suggested going from 3 doses a day to 4. They're wondering, when they should take their medications versus eat meals, because as it's difficult with the different doses, and then also when you eat your meals. And they also notice that they're occasionally forgetting to take some of their doses. So let's go through then what an occupational therapist might do with the evaluation. So first, we'd look at the person and what the person's, their fine motor skills, are they able to manage the little pills, their cognition and thinking, and then also their typical schedule. When do they get up? When do they like to eat? What types of activities do they do throughout the day? So really kind of honing in on what the person needs are. And then the second thing would be to look at the environment. So that would be, what kind of medication container are they using now? Maybe what is needed different. And then also looking at any kind of potential supports that they might have with taking their medication, and also reminders, of course. And what are they using right now? Are those reminders working or not? And then finally, we think about the occupation, and really, again, like I mentioned, break down the task of managing your medications and taking your medications. It's not as easy as just taking a pill. As you know, there's many different steps to being able to take your medications at the right time, during the right, with your food, and then also not missing a dose. So then what would be the intervention in this case that an occupational therapist might suggest? So first, they would work together to create a new medication schedule based on the doctor's recommendations and then the person's typical schedule. Like I said, when they wake up and when they typically eat, and working out a schedule that would be beneficial. The next thing would be to recommend a 4-dose-a-day pill organizer. So there's a lot of different options out there with pill organizers, even this 4-dose-a-day. There are so many different things. But again, looking at all the person's needs, do they like to carry their daily pills with them, or do they keep them at home? These are all things that an OT would work within their normal patterns. Another thing would be creating an ongoing phone timer for all the doses. So really setting up a really good reminder for that. And then problem solving, when they said they were missing some doses, would problem solve those and say, okay, what's going on, when you're having that trouble? And so coming up with a plan so that they can make sure they're getting their doses. And then again, practice this new routine. These are new things that we're introducing. So it takes time to get into the habits and the routines. So I hope that kind of gave you some examples of how an OT would work with people who have Parkinson's, and what kinds of things we kind of think about, so you understand when it might be appropriate, when you might need an occupational therapist. And so then I'd like to go on of just some further resources that tell you about insurance coverage. So if you're over 65 and have Medicare, Part B will cover 80% of the occupational therapy services if these 3 requirements are met. So first of all, if it's medically necessary. Second, if your doctor says that the services are needed, so you would need a doctor's order. And number 3, that the services are provided in an outpatient setting. Now, I have seen there are private practice occupational therapists that work in the home, and they are able to bill Part B. So it says outpatient setting, but I do know that the home sometimes can be billed under Part B. And then for people under the age of 65, if you have Medicaid or private insurance, the payment really is dependent upon the plan. So that's really something that you'd have to check in ahead of time about. And then, how do I find an OT now? Okay, this all sounds great, but now, how do I find an OT? So the first thing I would do is I'd go to your neurologist or your movement disorder specialist or the nurse practitioner also, and ask them if they recommend an occupational therapist. Because like I mentioned before, you really want to have someone that has experience and knowledge of Parkinson's disease. So that would be the first stop. Another area would be to consult your local rehabilitation area, or also, a clinic or hospital. Or if you're already getting physical therapy or speech therapy, those are great folks to ask because they probably know occupational therapists too that work with Parkinson's. So that's another people that you can ask. You can also call our APDA chapters. Our local chapters have a lot of resources and referrals that they could give you names, or call the national hotline if you don't have a local chapter. And then also, I think that Parkinson's support groups can be a great place. So if you're in a support group, ask folks, of their experience. Have they had occupational therapy? And, who would they recommend? That's great word of mouth. And then finally, sometimes people are in areas where it's just really hard to find these professionals. But I think the good news is that telehealth is becoming more and more popular, and it's growing. And so there are private occupational therapists that may be able to see you virtually. And so that's something to look into also. And then if you want to go further with occupational therapy resources, we have our American Occupational Therapy Association. It's a great website with lots of resources. If you also do a little search with Parkinson's in there, it'll come up with articles and things like that. So you can check that out. If you really want to keep digging in, just last year, they updated the OT practice guidelines for people with Parkinson's. So you can read that. Very interesting. And then our APDA website is a great place. You can do a search with occupational therapy and go to our resources that we have there too. So these are my references. And now it's time for your questions. So I'd like to ask Kim Sanders, our program manager, to join us. She's checking out the live chat right now, and she's gonna tell me your questions.
Thank you for having me, Amanda. So we have a few different questions coming in the chat box. And one of the first ones I'm going to start with is there a difference between OT in an outpatient facility or like an independent living facility as opposed to them coming to a home?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I think it all depends on the situation. So if someone really needs something specific to their living situation, whether they're in a facility or in their home, it probably is important to try to have an occupational therapist that can come into their home. So I'm thinking about, if there's like home safety issues. And so seeing their actual home environment would be really good. However, that's not always needed. Having occupational therapy in a clinic is okay too. And what the OTs typically do there is they'll ask a lot of questions. They'll say, okay, what is your setup here? What does this look like? And then they'll work with you. So, if maybe the issue is dressing or eating, things like that can really, they can work on that in the clinic. You can see different equipment and things like that. So it really depends on the situation. I wouldn't say one is better than the other, but overall, just getting any type of OT would be better than not doing that.
Okay. All right. And our next question is, how can occupational therapy help with my ability to sleep? So more tips for like fatigue management with Parkinson's.
Okay, so that I kind of touched on that a little bit before, but that is a large area with Parkinson's, and so there's really two things going on there. One is sleep, and the other is fatigue. And they can, of course, work together. If you're not sleeping well, you're going to be fatigued. But as far as sleep, when you asked about that, occupational therapists can work with someone on that sleep and rest. That was one of those colorful ovals, that occupations that I mentioned earlier. And so what they would do is they'd go in and they'd look at, okay, what is your exercise routine? What is your caffeine intake? What are their evening habits, so that they would work on like problem solving. They call it sleep hygiene. Problem solving, maybe how the person can have better, sleep hygiene. And then also, sometimes sleep is also more of a mechanical thing, just moving around in bed. Is that uncomfortable? Are they having trouble with that? Or are they getting up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom? So there's so many factors that are interplay with sleep. And so really kind of digging in and looking at what are the issues that are causing, and then problem solving how that could be addressed.
Thank you. And one more question would be, how can occupational therapy help someone with social participation? They mentioned that they saw it on the diagram that you had posted a few times throughout the presentation.
Yeah. So, some of those occupations that I talk about, it's like, well, geez, how could you help with leisure? How could you help? So yeah, I did mention that social participation. So what we find sometimes with Parkinson's is that people end up feeling like maybe they don't want to participate in social things. Either maybe they're embarrassed or there's new things going on that they, aren't sure about. And so really the OT would, again, assess what's going on, but really bring in, this is a piece of that I didn't really cover, but OTs really focus on what the client wants. So what is most important to them? So so this social participation really pinpoints. So we'd say, what do you really want to do? So say they want to go out to eat. That's really important to them, but they're feeling like they don't want to anymore because of, different reasons. So the OT would, look at why is that happening? And then maybe some ways that they could adapt, or, maybe a different utensil that would help hold food better so that they would feel more comfortable, when they go out, things like that. I'm thinking of, social participation, like if they want to still take care of their grandchild or do things with their grandchild, but they're unsure about things. So really problem solving, what things did you do? What's kind of the barriers that are keeping you from doing that now? And then how can we come up with, some ideas of things that you still can do if maybe we modify that a little bit so that you can still participate in what you want to do, but it's in a safe and comfortable way.
Perfect. And that actually leads to the next question, because you just touched on silverware. And someone asked, what helps with eating in public with people with tremors and Parkinson's?
Yeah, so I am going to dig really far into that on the next series, but this is great because this will be a good, kind of teaser for that. But there are actually a lot of things out there for eating. It depends on what the issue is too. If someone has tremor, actually some weight helps with tremor. So there's actually heavier utensils out there. They're called weighted utensils. That they're actually kind of looks very similar to normal utensils. And so I would say put those in a container and carry those with you to the restaurant. They really don't look that different. And then use those. They're a little heavier and just a little bigger, and that might just do the trick. If there's other issues going on, like maybe dyskinesia, which would be extra movements, then you look at something different. There's some high tech and low tech things for that. A low tech, they call it a swivel spoon, where it's on a swivel. So if you're having larger movements, it still stays level. And then there's some high-tech options too, that's called liftware technology and things like that, if you're having some things like that. So lots of different options. But the person asked specifically about tremor, right, Kim? Is that
just eating in public, like how to make them more comfortable?
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that, along with what I just mentioned, is there's they call them plate guards. And you can bring that along with you, and it just kind of pops on the plate. So if you're at a restaurant, it's not like you need a different plate. You just pop that on the side of the plate. And what that does is when you're scooping the food, it gives you something that you can, scoop the food up better against that. So that's a good idea. And then another thing is that there's this material called Dicem. And so you can just put a little piece of Dicem. So it's a very non-skid material that you could just put a little piece of it underneath your plate at the restaurant. And what that does is it keeps your plate really stuck in one spot so it doesn't move around. So there are a lot of different things that you can do with eating. And I'll dig in. I'll show you a bunch of pictures on the next webinar. So you'll actually see some pictures of what I'm talking about.
Perfect. And then we have a question from Wanda. You spoke about Medicare. Do you have additional information for veterans?
Oh, for veterans. Yes, I should have. Thank you, Wanda. Actually, if someone is a veteran, I would highly recommend going on the VA website because there are additional resources for veterans. If they were exposed to Agent Orange during Vietnam time, or the Camp Lejeune with the water. So they can also have additional benefits with that. So the VA has a good portion of their website that you can look up that with Parkinson's, and there's definitely additional resources if you're a veteran. Thank you, Wanda. Thanks for bringing that up.
And then we were asked about occupational therapists and help with mood issues like mood swings.
Yeah. So, I think what the OT would do is go in and kind of look at when this is happening, and then that brings up a very good point, is also make sure that they are getting treated. They're seeing that their neurologist knows about this, or their movement disorder specialist, and then to see if they would recommend also adding, a psychiatrist or psychologist to that. So, it brings up a good point, because when you have a healthcare professional, on your team that you're working with, if something else comes up that they know is, either out of their scope, they can recommend and talk about, getting further treatment. But as far as what OTs could do within their scope of treatment is really, talk about, when did this start? When is it going on? And then really look at, what do you like to do? What are some things, are there things that you used to do that you don't anymore? Because sometimes people especially if there's apathy going on, and of course depression, they stop doing some of these meaningful activities that we're talking about that they used to do. And sometimes, it's a matter of just thinking about what kind of activity can I add that would be meaningful to me and help in this situation with my mood. Of course, we always recommend exercise. That could really help with mood too. So there's so many areas there to kind of dig into, but it would be multi-faceted there.
And we have time for one more question. And I found, can OTs recommend how to modify hobbies with Parkinson's disease?
Absolutely. That's our bread and butter. So, occupational therapists really value people's hobbies and leisure, because these are things that are meaningful. And that's what I said, meaningful activities. And these are the things that are important to people. So absolutely, if someone has a hobby, say they were a woodworker, and now they're really kind of afraid, of using this type of equipment, but they really miss woodworking. Absolutely. And OT could come in and assess, what they want to do, what they used to do, and what they want to do, and then really problem solve of either maybe there's a way to adapt some of these things, this equipment, or how you're doing something. So absolutely, those are great things to address with an OT.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Amanda. It's been great learning from you today about occupational therapy, and we look forward to the next episode of Independence with Daily Activities on October 12th. To register, go to www.apdaparkinson.org.
Hi, I'm Leslie Chambers, the President and CEO of the American Parkinson Disease Association. Each month, across the country, APDA is providing support groups, exercise classes, and educational programs like this one to support the Parkinson's disease community. You can find all of our upcoming virtual events on our website at apdaparkinson.org/events. If you enjoyed today's broadcast, I hope you will consider making a donation to help keep programs like this possible. Your gift can help APDA support people living with PD through local programs, reliable resources, and groundbreaking research designed to find treatments and ultimately the cure for Parkinson's disease. Please donate today at apdaparkinson.org/donate. And thank you so much for your support.